Welcome to you all. AMA and Quant Legal Tech jointly welcomes you to the online panel discussion on compliance, the future of automation. By the expert panel members over here, you will be able to see them. So we have with us Mr. Dhruv Nagarkati, who is CEO of Quant Legal Tech. Dhruv, to give a brief introduction about Dhruv. Dhruv leads the company in its mission to transform the way people and businesses work so they can achieve their greatest ambitions, and he injects vital management skills and operational efficiencies into organizational processes, steering the firm through seamless transitions into larger, more agile businesses. And I will then hand over the session to Dhruv to moderate and see the further proceedings. Meanwhile, participants, I request you all to put off your videos so we can see the bandwidth. And whatever questions you have, you can put it in the chat box. Only the panel members will be keeping the videos on. Others are requested to put the videos on. Thank you. Yeah, over to you, Dhruv. Dhruv, you're on mute, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Radhika, and welcome everyone. As Radhika mentioned, we are very pleased to have an esteemed and very experienced panel to talk about what is the future of compliances. On this group and amongst the participants, I'm sure all of you who are in the midst of running businesses, whether from the legal function or the financial function or heading a business, compliance is something that affects all of us in one way or the other. And today, we have three people who will join me in a discussion in talking about how this function has changed over time and how do we use technology to automate such as these processes. To begin with, we have Mr. Jatin Jalundwala, who is the Chief Legal Officer of Adani Enterprises. Welcome, Mr. Jatin. We also have Mr. Aviral Saini, who is the CFO of Light Microfinance. And I also have with me my co-founder and colleague, Mr. John Matheson from Quant Legal Tech. So welcome, gentlemen. I'll start off with you, Mr. Jatin. This is a question I keep getting asked, in a lot of the conversations, saying that apart from understanding the regulatory environment, it's always the change in regulations that on a continuous basis that are a challenging aspect for people who are managing compliances. So maybe you can start off with talking about how have you dealt with this change, and what are the kind of significant learnings that the current pandemic has brought upon in terms of compliances?
Good afternoon to all. Thank you, Dhruv, for introducing me. Let me tell first that any business cannot respond effectively to a risk until they understand their exposure to that particular risk. So your risk assessment capability will need to be sharpened or has to be sharp. Now, how to do this? What capability are required to have the risk assessment? There are several things we can do. Some of them are that strong ability to identify new or changing regulations, especially if you are business operating on a global level. Secondly, close collaboration with the business units to understand any internal changes to standard procedures that might be consequently altered from time to time. The better the compliance team and the better the technology, the more effective your risk assessments will be. So first and foremost thing, any business or any corporate has to understand what are the risks involved and how to mitigate those risks. And one of the important points for mitigation of risk is automation. during the pandemic, we all know in last 1 year, we all are either working from home or a remote place. So what we have learned out of that? Most important compliance lesson learned is the value of interaction and collaboration. Many organizations acknowledge the risk of the operating in silos, because till 1 year back, we were at the workplace, we were having a meeting personally, we were talking to the people personally. But today, one person might be sitting in Mumbai, one other maybe in Bangalore, one maybe in Ahmedabad, working from home. So even all the employees also have realized that this has the great exposures on the organizational front. And how these are all risks, how we can mitigate all these risks, how the organization can more effectively and efficiently handle such situation like COVID-19 situation. Because during this period, there are all possibilities. Suppose you are not taking care of the digitalization or automation, then there are all chances of leakage of informations. Sometimes there are all chances that the compliances may not take place. So all this is required. And for that purpose, what is the need of the hour? So due to this pandemic, the financial disruptions is there. I may say people disruptions is also there. The information and details are also disrupted. So what we shall do? The most important need of the hour is for prioritizing the automation instead of using the old traditional way of compliance. The automation of compliances will significantly reduce the cost, will significantly reduce your risk of exposure, and also will give a great rating as far as the organization is concerned. The automation will also help in getting the audit of the risk and compliances on real-time basis, which will enable the organizations to take corrective actions before and alarming situations. Say, for example, we must know sitting anywhere. Suppose some application is loaded by employees and they are chatting on a particular application, then how the company will be in a position to know? All this requires a lot of concentration toward digitalization and automation. And in today's pandemic situation, you all know the business is going on. Lot of businesses have developed also during this pandemic situation. And for this, I emphasize more particularly on automation. And for that automation, we must engage a third party, which is more, I think, having a complete, what we can say, having complete idea, complete number one situation, how to implement the automation. That is the first need of an hour of any business organization. Through third party, we should try immediately, even any company, to do the automation, digitalization. That is what I feel.
Great. No, thank you, Jatin. I think that was very helpful. Avyar, maybe I'll come to you now. As CFO, when you're looking at remote working, as Mr. Jatin was talking about, how are you? I think someone's screen is on share. If you can stop that. Yeah, great. Sorry. So I'm coming to you. In this remote working environment, and as a CFO, handling not just compliance but also a large function, which is the finance-related side of it. How is your team, and I also know you're embarking on a journey of automation and automating this whole function yourselves. Two questions. One is, what prompted you to take that step? And the second question is, in your opinion, how are compliance teams actually coping with this whole working environment, with understanding regulation? There've been in crazy number of changes in regulations. What's the mood like within compliance teams, and how is it as a CFO that you're making their lives better and enabling them to perform as a high performance unit?
Thanks, Dhruv, and good evening, everyone. So I think the remote working concept has been there for quite some time, and I think it's quite popularly utilized in tech firms and larger firms because they anyway have a distributed model. So I think the larger firms were anyway sort of adept at it. It was working from home which sort of came out new. And I think we'll have to be very clear that the pandemic work from home is very different from the steady state work from home. I'll come to that. And before that, there might be some repetition between what Jatin said, is that typically when you look at a compliance function, compliance as a function, the complexity grows as the scale of the company grows. When you're a much smaller firm, you have lesser compliances, but at the same time, you are also more resource constrained. As you get into the mid-size, which is a sort of a transition period where light microfinance is right now, you sort of get more resources, the complications sort of increase. But at the end of the day, compliance typically ends up being a very routine kind of a job. The larger firms, they have a lot of resources, they have larger teams, much more complexities to handle, but then they also have so many resources at disposal that my sense is that the remote working was somewhat easier for them to adapt to. Remote working in itself comes with certain challenges or requirements, you can say, and I think Jatin put some of them very nicely out there. First is, do you have the infrastructure in place, which allows you confidentiality because it's a compliance matter? Does it allow you seamlessness, collaboration? The second is the culture itself, which I think Jatin pointed out very nicely, that currently you're in the office, you can just walk over to somebody's desk and say, hey, I need this data. But now you have to, schedule meetings. People are not used to that kind of culture, especially I would say in a smaller and mid-sized entity. That culture is not easy to build. Automation, system integration. Again, Jatin did point that out. If somebody has raised a ticket, a flag, filed something in, how do you get to know? Right now it's email, and then you suddenly pick up the phone and tell the other person. It's sort of very easy to do it when you're sitting in person. So remote working brings out all these different challenges. And then there are some very interesting pieces that come out are the regulatory requirements. You have to sign a check. What do you do? So especially if I talk about the pandemic situation, I think the remote working was very different. People were allowed to go out only at designated times, to designated places. So the challenges were very, very different. At Light, specifically what we did, we had identified that some kind of restrictions were coming up. Based on the chatter that we saw in the media, the kind of actions that were being taken across the world. So even last year, we identified that we had to go work from home. This year, again, we sort of preempted the whole thing and we went work from home much earlier. But what we also identified that this culture shift is not going to be easy. We handheld very carefully all our teams, not just compliance, all our teams, because this was a major culture change for everybody involved. And especially when microfinance, which is a very human intensive, a physical intensive business, it is even more important to continuously reach out to people, to continuously make sure that they focus on the right set of priorities at all given points in time. So broadly, if I say the compliance team and the finance team, the accounts team, all these three teams that are reporting to me along with the technology team, what we did was we were making sure that we talk on a daily basis. We make sure that, okay, you have a certain situation at your house, because like I said, the pandemic work from home or remote working is very, very different. You have your personal exigencies coming up in the second wave. The first wave was more about, okay, what hit us? People were not really ready for it. So you had to carefully be very, very sensitive to what other people are going through. It was a major change. So handhold them, guide them, make sure that they focus on the right priorities, and ensure that the right framework is given to them. And I'm very happy that the teams out here acknowledged, appreciated the effort, and they responded in a very, very nice manner. And we were, in fact, if you talk about it, we were able to conduct our audit online. That was even last year and this year as well. And if you look at the microfinance firms, many larger firms were not able to do that. But we were able to do that because we were very conscious and aware of the kind of change the scenario is bringing in and the kind of effort that would be required to mold our people and guide our people.
No, absolutely. I think you touched upon a very important point. One is technology can be a big enabler if you start kind of planning in advance and kind of looking at how it can touch very different aspects of the business. I'll maybe come to John. So John, I think given your experience at Intel when you were general counsel there and now of course founder of Quant, I wanted to touch upon, so we've spoken about how compliance as a function plays a role and how we can use technology to, bide our time in terms of remote working environments. But I want to come from a business challenge perspective. When you were implementing what you call a culture of compliance, what were the business challenges that you had to consider to try and stay compliant? Because sometimes compliance can always be there are two ways to look upon it. It can be looked upon as a stifling factor where you're forcing people to comply with certain things. But if you're in the right frame of mind, you can actually make it look as a business enabler and allow business to grow. And so what is your interaction and your experience in the business challenges of staying compliant?
Well, thank you very much, Dhruv, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm speaking to you from sunny Singapore, so I hope I'm loud and clear. But as Dhruv pointed out, I have a long history working in an MNC environment. And so I guess when we talk about business challenges, I think of these in terms of structural and cultural issues. And I was delighted to hear both Avril and Jatin mentioning the cultural factor, because it's hugely important in the compliance world that in addition to having good processes in place and good technology, we have to enable a culture of compliance. And I've spent a good amount of my career focusing on that very issue. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, Dhruv, but I think to get to your question, the business challenges, I look at them as both structural and cultural. On the structural side, there's basic housekeeping involved in the compliance world. And frankly, if your contracts are not digitized, if you haven't imported all of your documentation, into a good system, particularly a contract management system that can import and alert you to critical clauses as to when expiry may be happening or when payments may be due. So having that digital transformation in good shape is tremendously important. And with that, the cloud infrastructure, which, as the other speakers mentioned, enables us all to tap into the same resources. So without those things being in place, really the technology isn't going to save you. You end up with a very expensive piece of software that doesn't solve your problem. So let's move to the cultural side, because as I say, this is one of my great fascinations. And I spent a lot of time working on this issue of how do you embed a culture of compliance into an organization. Now, later, I think in response to some of the other issues, we'll talk more about the technology answer, but let's talk about just culture per se. And I was delighted to hear the former speakers mentioning this very issue. But, I think back to when I was in the legal team, we were kind of regarded as being the policemen, right? The legal guys, and you had compliance and you had the CFO's office. We were often perceived as the rule makers. And as much as we tried very hard to be partners to business, there's always a natural tension. So when you're introducing a new legal requirement to a business unit, there's a degree of sensitivity that you have to engage to do this properly. And I think, for example, you go to the sales team and you tell them, well, there are new privacy laws and there are new environmental regulations we need to comply with. And you know very well that their instant response is going to be, this is more bureaucracy, I don't need this. So you start with that initial response, and then you get to the point where they tell you, yes, we know we have to do this, we'll do what we have to do, but please don't impact our business, right? We hear this all the time. I'm concerned about Q3 sales, you're concerned about compliance. Well, you get to know them and you start to talk about these compliance issues. And then you get to a point where you can start arguing that this is a compliance that deals with privacy. Our company cares about privacy. This is a compliance area that deals with environmental issues. We care about environmental issues, and our customers care about environmental issues. And sometimes you can get your internal clients, as we see them, call them, to start thinking about compliance as a business differentiator. Rather than this being a burden, if you are a compliant company, you can use that as part of your marketing pitch. We all see the bad stuff in the newspapers when things go wrong, but we don't do a good enough job in encouraging our internal clients to use compliance in a very positive way. Yes, we're concerned about CSR. We've got a very strong CSR policy. We do so much in environmental health and safety. All of these things build you product and brand awareness. So I would point to that on the culture side before we talk about the hardcore tech, Dhruv.
Great, thanks. Before we move on to the next question, we have a few poll questions. So may I request Radhika to just put up the first poll question. All of you will see a pop-up screen coming up. Just spend a few seconds and answer, and we'll have the answers after that. So the first question, please, Radhika. So what is the biggest challenge that your organization is facing? The first one is data management, keeping pace with the regulatory change, and scalability. Great. I think we can end the poll there, which is interesting, where it says data management and keeping up with the regulatory change, as we all know, is always a challenge. So maybe I'll use that as a precursor to the next question, and I'll maybe come to Jatin. Jatin, one was this whole concept of constant regulatory change, and as a global company that you're part of, and probably in the forefront of this whole regulatory policy side, what in your opinion can you do to two things? One is to be ready for all these regulatory changes that are coming up. And according to you, what are some of the key trends that are shaping compliance management for 2021 and 2022? So what should compliance functions look for in the future?
Thank you, Dhruv. Let me take you from 2013 onwards. You know, new Companies Act have been incorporated in 2013. Lot of compliances are required to be carried out. Similarly, let me tell you, for the listed companies, SEBI regulations, which were changing from time to time, have given a lot of requirements for the compliances day in, day out. To give one small example, then when the board meeting for the results are over, within 15 minutes, the company has to upload the results to the stock exchanges, which was not there prior. If you see, number of new acts have been enacted in last 6 to 7 years. The acts which were not proper were deleted also, and some of the acts were made more clear, more rules and regulations have been provided, and which has made India a compliant country in a way we can say. So globally, our respect has also grown up because a lot of transparency brought in by the government so that the company become the compliant. Let me put you certain acts like CSR. Recently, corporate social responsibility, a lot of amendments came into force. A lot of compliances are required on that. I do not want to enumerate those for the time being. Similarly, if you see, due to this pandemic situation, annual general meetings and board meetings of the companies are virtuals. So everything has to be done virtually. Have we ever seen that India, the companies will be have annual general meetings where thousands of shareholders are gathering, will be online. So last year you see all the companies who are listed and who require all have this virtual annual general meetings. All this and more of 2020 and 21, a pandemic situation has now have created more thrust on the compliance. And last 3 years, if you see ESG, sorry, you all might be knowing about it, environment, social, and governance. These three things have been given a wide importance by the financial institutions and investors across the globe. What they want for that? They want the company should be a compliant one. Company should be having a good governance. Now people do not see only the results of the company, working of the company, but the weightage has also been increased towards the compliance. Lot of digitalization companies from abroad have entered to India because now they also realized it's a good market as far as India is concerned if we want to go for digitalization. And this has led to more and more digital companies entering the Indian market, which have a very principled and disciplined approach towards ESG obligations and other compliant obligations. So all these new trends and new forces, new rating pattern, if your company want to be rated, it needs not only results, okay, this has turnover has gone up like this, net profit has gone up like this, it's okay. But whether it is corporate governance is there, whether compliance has been carried out, all this needs to be completely seen by the raters. And prior to that, suppose financial institutions giving loans, they will first see whether how the company is doing the compliances, whether they are doing it properly or not. So all this has the immense situation that the companies must go towards the digitalization and automation as far as compliance is concerned. Let me tell you what Mr. John has said about the contract management. Very important, because sitting at home, if everyone has to manage the contract, the whole contract system shall also be digitalized. Starting from the contract when it is entered into, how to monitor the contracts. And suppose while monitoring the contract, you find other side has violated something or you do not violate something. And if somebody has other side has violated, to send a letter to him, all this is required to be digitalized and automized. And this is the need of the hours today.
No, absolutely. I mean, taking a small example of what you said, we were once interacting with a company where last year during the first lockdown, and everyone was scrambling to figure out whether you can enforce force majeure clauses on a lot of your lease agreements. We were interacting with a company that couldn't even access their documents because they were sitting in an office and they were locked out of it. So they didn't even know which which contracts had force majeure clauses that they could enforce. So this gives you a very small example that, as all three of you have been saying, this understanding risk at every level, whether it's statutory, whether it's exposure through contracts, is critical. And that's where I think technology comes into play. So I think the next question, may I'll go to you.
Just to add here one more point, just it reminded me, the way I told about annual general meetings, if you see the last year's audit of all the companies, most of the companies audit would have been done on the system only, because during that period there was complete lockdown, and even so many companies announced their results. And how it was possible, auditors sitting at home on computer was auditing the accounts and giving the audit report.
No, absolutely. I think thanks for that. So John, maybe I'll come to you next, because you're neck deep into the tech world and have been trying to solve this problem of, how does technology and law, in this case we're talking compliance, but in general, how is technology and law intersecting, and what are the kind of synergies that you can extract out of it. So maybe if you could touch upon saying, how is technology actually shaping compliance management, and what are some of the newer technologies that we can expect globally and in India that can impact the functioning of good compliance management?
Great, thank you, Dhruv. Well, I think at one level, the pandemic has simply accelerated what was already going on. So I don't see that as a game changer, other than it introduced a whole group of companies to technology that was already there. But from a legal tech standpoint, legal technology we call legal tech, this has been a period of tremendous digital transformation, probably unlike we've seen at any time. And the technologies we are bringing to market are fundamentally changing the way that people view compliance and how they go about executing compliance. And when I talk about this, I like to cite Professor Richard Susskind. If you've heard that name before, he's the author of Tomorrow's Lawyers, and he's also the advisor to the Chief Justice in the United Kingdom on technology. He's a legal tech guy with a PhD in AI. Now, he was speaking just several months ago at a forum, and he said that the new technologies will be applications that touch the client and support the delivery of services. They touch the client and support the delivery of services. And the second part of that is that the historical one-on-one professional advisory role that we're used to with lawyers and accountants and advisors will make way to technology that is embedded in the relationship. So this is a fundamental change, and it was kind of music to my ears, because this is what we spend so much time trying to solve, right? How do we get from these static linear tools to the interactive tools that operate real time? And yes, there will be AI, ML, NLP, all manner of additional technologies that will enhance those things. But this is now coming to market. And you can compare that with, say, your legal update service. It's pretty much a dumb terminal, right? It tells you what the law is, and it might tell you when your compliances are due, right? That's a calendaring app. And frankly, that's really automation, not transformation. But when we look now at how these platforms are evolving, we're seeing some very different things. Firstly, the technology is able to search, incorporate legal requirements, and distribute them automatically to an organization. Like, we've got 20,000 compliance obligations in our database. We use advanced algorithms to map your company footprint to this database. And so that information is with you very quickly. Now, this is very important because in a COVID environment, you can't rely on a monthly update, right? You've seen how many different changes and variations in state level issues there have been in India alone. So these have to be real time. So that's now baked into the platform. Secondly, we need to move away from the dumb terminal to what we call a full resource library. And what we like to say is that if we can enable your organization with the information they need to execute compliances, it takes the pressure off the professional group and it gives you more assistance doing your job. So every compliance task should appear with the SOP that the company's got, your own internal policy on how you complete this compliance. It may also integrate your external lawyer's advice. They may have access to the platform. They may be feeding real-time information about legal cases. So your compliance interface becomes a real-time interface with the whole globe. And then, of course, you need to have a dashboard that tells everyone what's going on really on a second-by-second basis, because without that real-time dashboard, you won't have an audit-ready compendium of what you've completed. So let me stop there, Drew.
Great. Thanks, John. Aviral, I'll come to you now. I think what I want to answer is ask you two things. One is, what do you think, the key factors of a successful CFO and compliance officer? But the other question I wanted to ask you in terms of actually practically implementing a culture of compliance, how do you get, you take compliance seriously, of course, you understand the risks, you understand the business implications, but how do you get the lowest level person in the organization to, because you're as good as your team, you're as good as your wider compliance functions, not just the immediate reportees, but the wider people to be compliant as an organization. So how do you get everyone to buy into this compliance culture? And how do you get someone at the lowest level in the organization whose compliance obligation might just be a peripheral compliance obligation, but for him or her to take it seriously, because it all then bubbles up into your 100% A+ report that you can then drive the organization?
Right. So I think very important questions, Dhruv. I have a quick short answer to the first one, and I think Jatin did sort of ascribe to it or allude to it when he was speaking, giving it the first up. Any CXO or any senior leadership person primarily has to be an enabler for business success. And when I say business success, it's basically sustainable growth. I think Jatin very nicely put forward the risk aspect of it, but broadly, what qualities this particular person would need to have as a CXO or as a senior leadership member, have a very strong understanding of the business and the market that they are in. They need to remain open to innovation and disruption, because that's just the nature of the game nowadays. They need to know how to prioritize and deliver timely decisions. Because a lot of times, and typically, I think I think John also mentioned that the legal guys are looked as the security guys who just don't let you move around. So I don't think that is really the case. But for a good chief compliance officer, good chief legal officer, it is important that they understand the business. They remain open to the kind of innovations, disruptions that regulations bring in, and also the business brings in, the customers bring in. And prioritize these facets of business and give timely decisions, because that's the only time when they can be enablers of business growth and success. And I think if you're able to do all of this, then you'll also be able to identify where your risk areas are, where you're possibly going to fail, and you educate your peers. I think John and Jatin very nicely put that out there. that you may be chasing compliance. And I think John mentioned that very nice example. I'm looking at my Q3 sales, but you're looking at compliance. Well, they're both equally important. So the two have to come together. The compliance officer needs to educate the business officer. Look, this is the framework we're going to work in. What do you need from my side? So if these things come together, there is just no way the business is going to fail, and they'll be operating well within the compliance framework. From a CFO perspective, the CFO has to put out the financial parameters on what framework you can work in, what can you touch, what can you not touch. And the compliance officer basically enables the business team to chase their targets by giving them a good framework, which ensures that the compliance and regulations are met in spirit. Coming to the other question, how do you get the lowest level contributor in the organization? If I can use the lowest level term freely out there, but everybody's a contributor. See, compliance automation is one tool to sort of enhance your control overall, but ultimately it's a software or a service. Unless you build the right processes, controls, and culture around it, there is just no way it is going to be successful. To your question, Dhruv, how do I make sure that everybody is sort of buying in? It's a big culture change. Just first, first up, just getting to know that there is a new regulation, that itself is a change that people are not very easily ready to accept. Getting everything onto a technology platform and then having them to move onto the platform to ensure that everything gets uploaded, it is monitored, it is approved. It's a culture change. It's a change of how things will be. At Light, what we are doing is we're taking it in a very phased manner. So one, we are picking up what kind of compliances do we want to sort of start off with. So for example, we have divided this into 3 phases. First is the regulatory compliances, because those are non-negotiable mandatory compliances and they're external compliances. Then you have internal compliances, and then you have further enhancements. So this is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Then there is another level that I'm building in. That first, the management has to become comfortable with it. A very short, small set of people who become comfortable with it, let the rest of the organization work as if nothing has changed. It's only when you sort of get people used to it, they see value in it, they see the benefits and the efficiency it brings in, do they become change champions. Once they become change champions, I have a set of 20 people who are ready to train the rest of the organization to take it up. And at the same time, I will also sort of point out that not everybody really needs to contribute to this platform. We have to be very, very careful in identifying who needs to contribute, who does not need to contribute, so that their focus remains very clear. But at the same time, the implementation needs to be very, very carefully done. You need to have the right set of processes around it so that the right set of people are monitoring it. In our case, the MD, CEO, CFO will be monitoring the entire progress. The rest of the people will be hand-holding them to make sure that they buy into this culture. They understand what the change is all about. They see the benefits. Once they see the benefits, then they're ready to go. Then the organization is ready to go. Then I'll be able to add on as many controls I want onto it. I'll be able to bring in as many people I want onto the platform. That's the approach that we have.
No, interesting. I think change, as you talking about change management itself, is such an interesting topic. And I know I'm dealing very closely with a law firm who's trying to undergo similar technology change in a slightly different thing. And we've tried multiple models, and it's always an iterative process to kind of really bring about real change, especially when technology is involved. What I'll do now, maybe I will go to the second poll question. So Radhika, if you could put that up. So the second one is, has the forced remote working culture affected compliance filing and compliance practices? Great, thank you. So 62% of you say yes, it has. I will actually go to the third poll question also, because I feel that's an important follow-up question to this. And then we'll go to the last few closing remarks from our panelists. So Radhika, if you can put the third poll question also, please. So what level of compliance automation has your compliance function achieved? I just want to see how this is correlated with the difficulties people faced in remote working environments. Great, thank you. Very interesting. So largely manual or largely automated with few manual thing definitely is the majority, but maybe some correlation. I know it's a small sample size, but some correlation with the struggles of people that face managing compliances remotely. What I'll do now, since we have about 10 minutes left, I will open the floor to questions from anyone, and then I will maybe ask each person to maybe have a minute or two of closing remarks on this topic. So are there questions from anyone? Please feel free, you can put up your hand and then Radhika will direct them.
So Dhruv, I think first question we have from Alexander. That is, how effective, it's for John actually. How effective do you think stock market driven ESG compliance is?
So the John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now, yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, I don't know, John, maybe even Jatin, you also may want to take this. How effective do you think stock market driven ESG compliance is?
Probably more Jatin's area, I would think, because he touched on that in his comments.
Yeah, maybe Jatin, if I can ask you to quickly touch upon that.
Thanks. ESG compliance is from the viewpoint of the stock exchange. As far as India is concerned, as of now, SEBI regulations have not put into ESG completely for the compliance. But there are various ESG compliances which have been required by the rating agencies, by the financial institutions, even foreign institutions, and which ask for certain financial ratios, which ask for certain financial parameters to be complied with. Say for one example, it asks for at least 2 women directors have to be there on the board of the company. So that is then your rating or a marking system will go up. This is what ESG requirement. Social means, suppose you are a company having a manufacturing unit at a particular place, what you are doing for the surrounding people. That is also not exactly a compliance, but it is what type of activities like CSR activities you are doing, or what activities for the development of the nearby villages, towns you are doing. This is required. Secondly, environment, what we are saying, for the environment protection also, the company does what it does. Say for example, in today's scenario, coal has been considered, coal, that is thermal power plant, the coal has been considered as a negative point for any company because it is affecting adversely to environment. So all this has been taken care of, parameters are required for ESG compliance.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Great, so then maybe I'll ask in the order, maybe I'll ask Aviral for you to start, then John and Jatin, if you could maybe close. Just 1 or 2 minutes on any closing remarks that you would like to highlight, given you're in the thick of it, you're driving change within your organizations. Any closing remarks that you feel maybe have not been highlighted during this webinar, but you'd like to leave a message with?
Thanks, Dhruv, for that. So very quickly, I think, in fact, I would say I believe that automation is here to stay and it has a major role going forward. At Light, we are getting into the automation side because we are scaling up. And as I had mentioned, as you scale up, the complexity goes up. To make sure that you are compliant at all points in time, you will have to take support from technology. Now, automation can basically result in very strong controls in risk management, a faster go-to-market strategy, much higher investor confidence, and of course, governance gets a big boost. Your board of directors gets a lot of comfort out of that. So I think there are big positives out of automation and deploying technology in compliance. Of course, with the right set of monitoring and processes around it. I think, and the ROI, I think people can calculate it very quickly from the possible lapses, the penalties, the business delay because of time lost in compliance can all be factored into to figure out the ROI that you get on this investment. So I think automation in compliance is definitely here to stay and the way to go. What would be very interesting is if currently what we have is, like John mentioned, is like a calendaring system that there are certain compliances. We know what date is coming in. If some analytics start running behind it, so this would enhance the risk management to a different degree. If there are certain reports which get delayed on a regular basis, or let's say one report got delayed this month, then there would be associated compliances which will automatically get delayed. So those kind of red flags, if they start popping up, I think the management and the governance will go up significantly, because it just enables you to make sure that, okay, we might be pushing hard on one compliance, but there are other compliances where we need to address and sort of bring everything back on track. So that's a small example. I'm sure there are more out there. Of course, the utopian scenario would be where we are able to directly integrate with the regulator itself and remove interventions. But I don't know where when that time would be, how open the regulator would be to that kind of integration and interaction. But automation is definitely here to stay. I think people have to time it out. The sooner the better.
Great, thank you. John, any closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just mention a couple of success factors that we try to aim at with technology. And I think the bar here is very high, but to deploy a technology solution, we have to save you money or we have to improve your state of compliance. And we certainly aim at doing both of those things. We had a case a little while ago where we had a finance house that was going from 500 to 900 locations, and they wanted to do that without increasing their compliance team. Well, technology enabled that to happen. I was very pleased on that first poll that no one saw scalability as a problem. We've actually cracked scalability. We've fixed that one completely. Secondly, and you might find this a little bit unusual, but technology has the ability to increase your compliance headcount without costing you anything, right? Think about that. Technology can increase your compliance headcount without costing you anything. And the reason is that we enable distributed ownership. And the principle is that every compliance task should be executed at the lowest level of the company where it can be properly carried out. And if technology can enable the owners of those activities to execute, then that extends your reach around the company. And thirdly, the thing that ties all of that together is tone from the top. Now, we've seen, from our speakers that it's very clear you get strong tone from the top, from your CFO, your legal team. But when you've got a distributed team, how do you continually keep up that cadence of messaging? So what we try and do is come up with ways of how your CEO can talk about compliance more often. And so we build what we call a C-suite compliance handheld application, just with really basic information. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Push button, great job. Push button, what's going on here? So it doesn't need a lot of technology, but once you bring your senior people into the compliance conversation, it makes a powerful impact on your company.
Great, thanks, John. And Mr. Jatin, final few words from you.
Yeah, Aviral and Mr. John has clearly said that, and it is definitely a requirement of the automation. Say it is an automation what I can say is a basic requirement today for even any startup company. because a company has to do a lot of compliances, a lot of acts are to be complied with, and therefore either a running business or a startup business must have the compliance system on place. Let me tell you one practical example of our group. We have 6 listed companies, even one port and logistic vertical, where we have about 35,000 compliances, because there are about 100 laws which are applicable to that particular vertical, ports and logistics. So and everyone will imagine what is the need of compliance and how far it is possible for a person manually to do it. Therefore, it is essential to have an automation. And for that, what we can do, what Aviral has said, down the line people to the top level people, we have done like a person who has to comply with has been called as a performer. The person who is observing him is a reviewer, and then it is a business head. So when there is a particular act to be complied with, before a week, it will be popped up to the actual users, that is performers. If it does not perform in next 3 to 4 days, it will be raised to the next level, that is to the reviewer. And at the time of last day of compliance, if both are not doing, it will go to the head business. And then we will come to know, okay, this particular act or this particular compliance has been done or not done. And prior to that also needs all the task has to be listed properly. What laws are required to be complied with, when it is to be complied with, all this needs to be automated. And then only the performer or reviewer can do the proper job. So in today's world, automation is a must, as that's the thing I want to tell.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think you touched upon, the scale at which you deal with, where you're talking about 35,000 compliances just for one entity. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, as you rightly said, even startups today with just one head office and maybe one plant can have anywhere between 900 to 1,400 compliances and maybe 10 to 20 filings on a monthly basis. So you're right. And I think the general theme, if I could sum these things up, is yes, of course, automation is important, but setting the base correctly, especially if you're a startup, if you start early and put the right systems in place, you're really enabling yourself to grow and enabling yourself to scale. And compliances can be a friend and can be a business enabler. So on that note, I'd like to thank Aviral, John, and Mr. Jatin for your time, and everyone else on this forum for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much.